Islamic University, Malaysia, Tan Sri Dato Emeritus Prof. Dzulkifli Abdul Razak. You have the floor, sir. A round of applause.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu syafil anbiya mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Excellency High Commissioner Brother Nurudeen Muhammed, Professor Amir from International Office, Brother Ugun Salah Qasim, NISCOM President, brothers and sisters. I mean, this is the only place that we can address everybody like brothers and sisters. Nowhere else you can do this. Yeah? So, alhamdulillah, I take the message from the High Commissioner that we are brothers and sisters, we are one in all dimensions, particularly we are Islam, Muslims, and Malaysia and Nigeria is no different. I've been to Nigeria and I feel almost part and parcel of you. I will show you later on why I feel so. So, congratulations celebrating your 60th anniversary of your National Independence Day for Nigeria. We just had our 63rd Malaysian Hari Merdeka, and I'm also very excited to hear some of you sing Negaraku. I will learn a little bit more about the Nigerian anthem. Next time you come, we will sing it. Okay, so I've been given this task to speak to you about sustainable development, although it is in the context of Nigeria, but as mentioned again, I think the context could have been different, but the concepts are basically the same. And the concepts converge to whatever we are saying, how do we come together on a mission of sustainability, which in short means that everybody must be treated equally, dignified equally, live in peace, and also live in a case of being sustainable. We do not appreciate, neither do we tolerate large disparities between developed and developing countries, or even in our own nation, the rich and the poor. We want to equalize this as much as possible within the context of sustainable development. Yeah. Before that, I want to go down memory lane a little bit. In the year 2014, where I was invited to Nigeria, particularly to the University of Ilorin, to give a talk on the convocation lecture entitled something the same as this one, Sustainable Development in a Transdisciplinary sort of approach or concept. Can I have the first slide? No? It's always the same challenge when you want to do technology, it doesn't work. When you try it out, it works perfectly. So there's something amiss there. Okay, good. Next one. Yes. This is in Ilorin. I don't know how many of you are from Ilorin. Alhamdulillah. So I was invited by the president then, Professor Ghani, and I think the guy in the center is Chancellor, a prince of one of the places I cannot remember, and that was me given the parachute. I got the parachute and I wonder whether I should be wearing it, but as well I didn't, because none of you are wearing the parachute. Anyway, so that's a very memorable occasion with the Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor. We had a party welcoming us for that occasion. Next. So I was asked to give a convocation lecture on transdisciplinarity as far as sustainable development is concerned. I wear my national parachute, the Malay costume, all right? Because every time I meet a Nigerian, they always wear their national costume. Very few of them wear coats and ties. The Malaysians are very fond of coat and ties, and they will wear very colorful hats and complete set. So when I go there, I feel a little bit embarrassed to wear this coat and tie. So I bring my own parachute, which is quite small, but nevertheless, there you are, and there's no coats and ties. Next one. So the topic is something like innovation. I think the transdisciplinary approach is all about sustainable development, and this is the big LED screen that they have in Ilorin. Even NIUM do not have one, so I think we need to buy one. At least be at the same with Ilorin. Next. And this is during the convocation kind of press release. Again, I'm given another outfit, and this outfit looks kind of interesting also. Right, so I have all this outfit. Next time when you call me, give me a lead time so that I can find them and wear them as I come this time around. Right? Okay. I've been given this title, and I have also been given a name in Ilorin. That's my Nigerian name, Auwal. I had a radio interview by the students, and at the end of the day, they announced that your name now is Auwal. I still used it in some of my writings, inshallah. Right? So, on a serious note, sustainable development is something which is very important. Moving now from the decades of the 21st century and moving on. And this concept is, again, I want to repeat, is about how do you unify human beings. How do we get together, live together, and share things together? I mean, it is not tolerable in the context of sustainable development. There are the poor and the rich, only in a very extreme way. In many of our countries, Muslim countries in particular, this is one of the major problems, and that is why I brought this whole concept here. This is supposed to be an international university. Excellency, there are more than 100 countries here, of different dimensions, different sizes, different colors there, but we want to be unified in one. But only we can do that if we start sharing prosperity together. Yeah, we can never talk about being unified if there's a richer and there's a poorest. Yeah, you can imagine you can unify, but at the end of the day, the poorer will demand from the rich, and the rich will go on suppressing the poor, and that's not a formula for success. And that's why when I came, I brought in this whole idea of sustainable development, and now, alhamdulillah, we are going into the second phase of it. Yeah. On that note, we also given the status by the United Nations University just last April as a regional centers of expertise on sustainable development. In other words, we have got a level of authority to run courses, to work seminars, to guide others as far as sustainability is concerned. And our sustainable outfit is called the Greater Gombak Sustainable Center. And Greater Gombak includes Kuantan, includes Gambang, includes Pagu. Yeah, for those of you who are away from Gombak, it doesn't mean that you are not part of the Sustainable Center, you are part of the Sustainable Center. And it is the one and only Islamic university that is given this status of regional centers of expertise for sustainable development. So it becomes incumbent upon us, yeah, to take sustainable development on a different plane. Not just to talk about what the West are talking about. There's an Islamic perspective that needs to be introduced. There's also Islamic worldview that needs to be introduced, Islamic values that we want to embed into this, so that sustainable development is equally applicable to the Muslim, even if not so, as compared to the non-Muslim. So it is not a secularist concept as most of you are made to understand because it comes from the United Nations. It is equally spiritual. I think there are books that I will probably show you later, that the spirituality is also part and parcel of sustainable development, although it is not much talked about because the Western world is not into spirituality, but it will be our task to embed it and to make sure that it's part of sustainable development. Yeah? And alhamdulillah, last July, next slide please. Yeah. Last July, we were accorded a status of Sustainability Institution of the Year. Meaning to say, out of the so many institutions that works on sustainability, IIUM is the best in the world for the year 2020. I'm so proud to say that because we are the youngest, and yet we are now able to put some sort of a status that we are relevant to the world at large. Doesn't mean the Muslims or the Islamists are marginalized, often we are, but in this case we claim our position and status as one of the best, if not the best, Sustainability Institute of the Year. So we won this, and this was announced in New York, yeah, during a forum of the United Nations Environment, and we beat 8 other institutions around the world, and none of them are quote-unquote Islamic in their structure or curriculum or whatever. We are the only one, and alhamdulillah we became. So to me, it is something that we now need to capitalize. We need to leverage, we need to make it more visible that this university is equally responsible for this whole notion of sustainable development, no matter who you are, wherever you are. You may be a diaspora here, but when you go back home, you are no longer a diaspora. Then you need to also work on this context of sustainable development. Right? Next. So I'm just going to go very quickly. Can you just press all the buttons that you've got? Yeah. We started off in the year 2000 when we introduced what we call the Millennium Development Goal. Okay, stop. The Millennium Development Goal was the first attempt to equalize. What is it that we want to equalize? We want to equalize the 8 goals of poverty, of hunger, of gender equity, of mortality, death, mothers' sort of health, question of health, a question of sustainability, all those 8 and number 8 is very important, of partnership. How do we work together to bring this idea of people are the same, they must be equally dignified, and they must work on the same goal. That is what we call the Millennium Development Goal, because it was introduced in the year 2000, and we are moving into the new millennium as it were. All right. Now, after trying this for 5 years, it doesn't work. And why it doesn't work? Because the word education wasn't there. Yeah. In other words, you need to educate ourselves on what sustainability is all about, how do you go about it, and how do you make it work. So in the year 2005, they invented what they call the United Nations Decades of Education for Sustainable Development. For the first time, the word education is being introduced, and universities, schools, and all education institutions are required to mainstream this in their education. And that's why when I come here, when I stepped in the year 2018, I don't see this word sustainability being part and parcel of our curriculum, of our education, our pedagogy, and even our practices. In other words, we have been left out in this movement of sustainable development. And that's why we want to put it quickly in the year 2018 and brought this whole notion of sustainable development within the university. So they give us 8 years, from 10 years, from 2005 to 2014 to mainstream this into our curriculum. In anything that we do, sustainability must be one of the key concepts that you need to bring about in your education. How do you understand this, and how do you practice this at the end of the day? Yeah. So after 10 years, this was done very well. I think many universities have taken it up, being part and parcel of teaching. So when you teach economics, for example, at the end of the day, the question you want to ask, does this teaching of economics bring a question of equality? Does it bring economic justice? Does it bring fairness? Yeah? This whole model of economic growth, what does it do? Does it create more disparity, or does it create better equality? If it creates more disparity, then what do we need to do? To change the concept, to change the theory, and to make sure that the final product is again about justice, equality, and fairness. Yeah? When you do medicine, does it bring the whole concept of justice again, equality? So the final point that we talk about is about justice, and that's what Islam is all about. So I don't see a disparity between this and Islam. Islam at the end of the day want to bring equality, justice, and fairness, maybe in its own sort of terms, yeah, maqasid perhaps, yeah. But here we are talking about in a different term, but the outcome is the same. I mean, it's going to the same place, but probably taking different routes. But we will arrive at the end point. So when 2014 arrives, then we will look at how successful we were, and we find that we are not successful at all. And the reason is very simple. The people who set this target for the Millennium Development Goal are the people in the West, particularly Europe and US, and they define what is sustainable. And their sustainable is what they have been living. And most of them have been living on excesses. For example, United States of America live on the resources of 5 planets. They've got only 1 planet, but the Americans, Donald Trump and friends, live on the resources of 5 planets. Meaning to say, the 4 other planets, they must have got it from somewhere else or stole it from somewhere else. Where do they steal it? From Nigeria, from Malaysia, from all the global south. So there is no way Nigeria can be United States of America because we do not have the resources of 5 planets. So that model does not work. If you want to live like a European, you must have the resources of 3 planets. So among the Europeans and Americans, you need to have 8 extra planets. Where can you get these 8 extra planets when there's only 1 planet? And therefore, this is where the exploitation, the colonization, the so-called quote-unquote internationalization sometimes in use on those stuff. They say, let's internationalize, by the end of the day, we become marginalized, they take whatever they need to take. And this whole concept of being fair was then swept aside. And that's one of the reasons why this Millennium Development Goal does not work. So at the end of 2014, we then reinvent so-called Millennium Development Goal into Sustainable Development Goal with 17 sort of targets. Yeah, and you can see those 17 targets. We'll talk about it a little bit. Yeah, and the target now is basically, we will say that everybody lives on resources of 1 planet. Doesn't matter you are Americans or white or black or whatever it is, resources of 1 planet. If you have got more than 1 planet, return it to whoever you have stolen it from, or you have taken it from. Yeah? It's almost like the museum now, you know. Most of the European museums are returning artifacts to places where they've stolen. Egypt, Africa, when they took it when they were colonizing our place. Now we say, this is ours, please return that. Same thing. Yeah? You have taken resources from our land, return it. I remember when I talked about Nigeria in the year 1990s, when you talk about, you know, the oil in Nigeria, cancer, all this group of people are fighting for that kind of a justice. They're sucking oil from our land and bringing it back to their place and developing their place and leave all the pollution in our place. This is not acceptable anymore under the role of Sustainable Development Goal. We need to be fair. All right? If you take the resources from our place, then we also need the resources in our country rather than just your country. How do you share this? And therefore, you find that the goals here are much more. We talk about the same thing, poverty, hunger, health, and so on and so forth. But we have other. We talk about peace at the same time. Number 16. We talk about 17. We talk about a partnership. And partnership on the same basis. 1-to-1, not 5-to-1 kind of equitability. So in the year 2015, we created another goal, what we call the Sustainable Development Goal, which we started in the year 2016 until 2030. Another 15 years of period. Right? 5 years has gone. We are now in the year 2020. We've got 10 more years to work this. And we can only work this if we in the university understand this, if we in the university implement it, if we in the university educate people around us, including politicians. Politicians are the one that is probably most miseducated on this, because their paradigm is still the old paradigm of having power. They want power, but they don't want justice. In universities, we want justice. Power can wait, but justice is more important than this power. So our paradigm, our work, action is probably different from what that's why sometimes I felt that university and the politicians cannot work together because the end game is different. So they come to the university, they get all the votes that they need, after telling you all these promises, and when they get the power, what is left for us are all injustice. Right? So the university needs to stand very strong on what justice is all about and demand that justice based on this idea of sustainable development goal, that everything must be fair and things. So we are now moving into, can I have the one more? Yeah. So we have that sustainable development goal as the global sort of mission under the United Nations, signed on by all head of states, as far as I can remember, definitely including Nigeria and Malaysia, including United States of America, the biggest and the poorest, all subscribe to this one idea, development based on one planet. All right? And therefore the word SDG, yeah, for short, means sustainable development goal, and we need to educate ourselves on that context of ESD, sustainable development goal. Yeah? Next one. So that is the one that we are talking about. It is not a perfect agenda, but it expresses a global consensus of high aspiration based on fine political balance. I think the balancing act is very much important. And I translate that into, in our terms, as LILWF. What is that? We talk about life, we talk about intellectual, we talk about lineage, we talk about wealth or resources, and we talk about faith. Some of you might recognize this, the Maqasid al-Sharia.
Yes.
Yeah? All the 17 goals could be condensed into the 5 elements of the Maqasid. If you talk about poverty, what is it all about? It's about saving life. Yeah? If you talk about what you call good health, what is it all about? It's also about that, life. Yeah? When you talk about number 8, decent work and economic growth, what is it all about? Could be about wealth. Okay? All the 17 goals are probably a condensation of the 5 elements of Maqasid. And for us Muslims, as long as this meets the outcome of the Maqasid, we are able to accept it. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Right? Because that's the same target that we want to arrive at the same time. So this is where we are putting in the Islamic aspiration in trying to understand what sustainable development is. Of course, when I talk to the Europeans, I don't say Maqasid al-Sharia. Yeah? I will say the 5 elements of human existence. Nobody can dispute you. No human beings doesn't want to live, have intellectual, have future generation, the lineage, have wealth and have faith at the same time. It doesn't matter where you come from. And therefore, this is another platform that we can share, and what values that we have together will make it work. And on that. Next slide, please. It's a colorful version. I got it from, I think, one of the Nigerian sort of website. I hope this is the right one. But it's very colorful. Some was literally boring. They're very colorful, and I see here the office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President talks about SDG. So you have put it at a very high pedestal. The presidents are interested in this, and the notion of no one will be left behind. That's the notion that we talk about, that everybody must be living on the same equitable sort of platform. Right? Let's move on. So what is it? What is an overarching, the end goal? The end goal, despite the 17 goals, this is the overarching thing. We want to talk about living on the same one planet. Right? If America is not behaving well, then we push them to Mars, because that's not the place where this Earth, you need to live together. If you cannot live together, you go to the Mars, you go to the moon, wherever you want. Take the other planets and stay there. Don't come back. Right? But if you want to live here, you must live on the same planet, understanding what is the limitation of this planet, how do you then work together, and how do you make things work for everybody, not just make America great. We want to make everything great as far as human beings concerned. So we talk about the people. Yeah, it has to be human-centric, because at the end of the day, the people will benefit. It's no point having a good planet, but everybody is dying. So it has to be human-centric, and the value must be a humanitarian value on that note. When you talk about humanitarian value, you talk about dignity. It's not so much the wealth. Sometimes poor people are more dignified than rich people. So we want to talk about dignity, and dignity comes from shared prosperity, and also the kind of justice that we talked about. Right? The only way to make it work is to work together in partnership. Malaysia, Nigeria, Malaysia, Bosnia, we've just released a book, I forgot to bring, about the Bosnians in Malaysia, how they benefited education from IIUM 30 years ago, and now how do they use that education to develop Bosnia. And I hope some of you can also write your experience in this university and compose and compile another book. This comes from the contribution from the Nigerian. So that this could be a documentation of what education in Islamic country can do to the Muslims. We are almost sometimes paralyzed, you know. We need to go to developed countries to get education. If you don't go to developed countries, we will all be uneducated. Here is an experiment that you can come to an Islamic country, be educated, go back to your country and develop the country just as good as any other universities or any other nation around the world. Now that's a paradigm that we want to introduce. So we've got a book on Bosnia. I think there's Indonesians are writing the book. The Maldives, I was still writing a book. I hope you can also write a book. I'll give you a copy to the president. Maybe they can, you can start thinking of what is it that you want to write as far as that. So we talk about sustainable development goal in the context of the 5 necessities, and that's the overarching goal. In other words, if you do sustainable development, if it doesn't meet this, then the sustainable development agenda of yours is not going to be working, or that's not the right one as far as that's concerned. Okay, next. To make it easy, they interpret it all in the context of peace. Yeah, so people, one P, planet, another P, prosperity, another P, and the other 2 P's is peace and partnership. Yes. Nope. Okay. So just to bear in mind, the end goal of sustainable development is a 5P. Planet, people, prosperity, shared prosperity, peace and partnership. Right? And I can say, and I can argue with you, these are basically the Islamic ideals based on Maqasid, which is the 5 necessities. At the end of the day, we talk about life, it's about people. And at the end of the day, we talk about wealth, it's about the planet, yeah? All the resources, the air, the water, whatever have you. When you talk about partnerships, about living together, right? The lineage that we talk about. And all these things, I think, can be understood within the Islamic worldview and the Islamic perspective at the same time. So we come from that angle rather than purely a secularist or a materialistic sort of angle. Next. Why is this important? I think I don't have to convince you, because the world is not in a balance. Yeah, those picture, economically we are not in the balance, ecologically we are not in the balance, socially we are not in the balance, certainly geopolitically we are not in the balance. We are in a mess. Right? And that's at the nation state. Individually we are also not in the balance. We read about suicide. Now with this COVID thing, we talk about, although the commissioners say, in the family we can live together, but the COVID now, there's a lot more domestic violence. Yeah? The wife is beating the husband because the husband now stays home. Every morning they will go to work pre-COVID. Now he's staying at home. Why are you staying at home? Then she beat her, go to work. So this domestic violence now is increasing. Yeah? Among students at the same time. I mean, they go to this online thing. I think you also read in Malaysia, some of the people do not get access to online. They got, they got very stressed, and they can go into what the next paradigm, the next issue they're going to look at is mental health. Right? So in other words, individually we are also going to go into a state of imbalance. Now, how do you bring this back to the balanced state and deal with the uncertainty ahead of us? Next. Before we can even think about that, there's another factor coming, which is not planned at all. But I think this factor is a good factor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this factor so that we can really reflect and think. COVID-19 has come in and then next, and gave us a kind of a realization, if you want to work out the balance, you need to work together. Right? So in other words, if everybody wants to be together, then you must practice the same way. You can do hand this, but you cannot hug. We used to do this, but it's no. So we talk about physical distancing. Yeah? This university is adamant that we talk about physical distancing. We don't want to talk about social distancing. Social distancing means I run away from the social fabric. I just isolate myself. All right? But here we need social bonding. Living together, we need to work together. We need a social solidarity. Because the virus do not recognize whether you're from Nigeria or from Malaysia, from Abuja or from Ilorin, they don't care. As long as you are not practicing it, then you get infected. So this whole idea of social solidarity, working together, coming together and making things work, in this case breaking the transmission of the virus to us, needs to be done worldwide. So it's not acceptable for America or for Europe say we don't want to wear masks. Yeah, because from not wearing masks, then it will infect other people and this spreader will go. A good example now is Sabah. Yeah, the politicians were so gung-ho with their politics, campaigning there and there. They won the election, we lost the election because they spread the virus all over the country again. We are now in the second wave. Some people said this on the third wave. So we need to work together, and that is a consistent message that this virus are telling us. If you want to defeat me, you need to work together, otherwise I will defeat you anytime. All right? So that will be the message. How do you find the balance next? And the balance to me is basically coming back to what sustainable development is all about. Because our life, just press the button. Yes, yes, yes. Stop. This is our life, at least in the third world, in the developing world. Not enough food, not enough water, not even enough energy to work because they've been working day and night, right? We are out of balance at the end of the day. A lot more people kill themselves. Suicide rates are increasing. The suicide rate, according to WHO, there are one person having suicide every 40 seconds. Yeah, I've spoken to you, but how long now? Half an hour. Maybe 200 people have died while we're talking. Right? Every 40 seconds there is a suicide in the world today. And most of them are from developing countries where there's no resiliency, where there's no coping, where there's no facilities, and we are more vulnerable than anybody else. So that's the kind of storyline that we have got. Next, right? It's almost the storyline that we act every day, right? Now we've got a new storyline with another factor called the coronavirus coming in. There's a new storyline, and it says that if we cannot work together, then we will be even more vulnerable in that sense. Next, right? So there's crisis ahead, we know, but now the crisis ahead next is more severe than this. We're talking about an invisible enemy. Now I'd like to reflect on what Al-Ghazali said. Al-Ghazali said, if you want to win the war, you must fight this invisible enemy. Al-Ghazali talked about egocentricity. He talked about lust. He talked about greed. He talked about conceit. He talks about all the things that we are not supposed to have to be a good human being, right? And then he said, until you defeat this invisible enemy, you will not be able to defeat the enemy that you see, right? And I think it's the same notion here. Until you're able to defeat this COVID-19, you will not be able to defeat whatever enemy else that you can imagine moving forward. Yeah. So this will be the new storyline, and therefore we talk about the new paradigm. We talk about the new norms. We talk about the new values. We talk about the new culture that we're going to develop. And this is the time that the Muslim will say the new culture is Islamic culture. The new values are Islamic values. Because they've been proven time and again that these are values that stays for a long time. It's an opportunity for us. But we must be aware, we must be ready. When the thing comes, we must be able to say our piece in a very clear and decisive way. No point at that time we still are quarreling, this come from this region, this come from that region. Although we are Muslim, we are just fighting with one another because the clarity is not there. And meanwhile, other people take the podium and run away with it, and we are left behind again in the context of being marginalized. Next. So I don't know whether I want to go into this, but the whole idea in our trying to make this is how do you develop this complete person? It is not about human capital. It's not about homo economicus. It's about the whole human being. Yeah, the insanul kamil or things of that nature. I'm not a religious person, so I don't quite know about this. But we've been talking about this for a long time. What model you talk about? We talk about the triple helix. The government, the university, and the business must work together.